So we're here with Cletus Rooney, and the date is July 20th, 2000. And we're here in his living room at 310 Northwest First Avenue in, huh?
Northeast.
310 First Avenue Northeast in Waukon, Iowa. So are you ready?
I guess so.
Okay. Well, first of all, none of us know anything about Grandpa and Grandpa Rooney and how they got together and your early childhood life or any of that. So, I mean, we don't even know where and when you were born. We know when you were born, but we don't know where you were born or any of the details or anything about your brothers and sisters. So, just start at the beginning and tell what you can remember.
Well, I was born in 1928 in Elmwood County on a farm, my grandparents' farm. It was just before the Big Depression, and my first memories of being very poor. We lived in a farmhouse 5 miles from town, and we had no automobile or horses, so when we went any place we walked and hoped somebody would pick us up. I went to a country school, and it was 2 miles to school, but it wasn't uphill both directions. I got a little older, third or fourth grade, fifth grade, I had to do chores, milking, and help them put in the crop, take it out. So when I was in the sixth grade, I got set back a year because I didn't attend enough school. You had to attend so many days a year. When I was 10 years old, we had nothing and many times went to bed hungry before that. A family in the neighborhood lost their only son, and I went to live with them. And for the first time in my life, I had a warm bed in a room by myself. And I had a real dinner pail instead of a gallon syrup pail, and had good food in it, had 3 meals a day. I got my room and board for doing chores night and morning before and after school. And I got $1 on Saturdays. Then next year I was basically the same thing, and I went thrashing, silo filling, shredding, and I got $2 on Saturday.
How old were you at this time?
12, 11, 12. So I lived with those people for 2.5 years, and I don't know why I left these people, and I went to live with another family through the 8th grade, and I got $10 a month in the summertime and got $2 on Saturdays. So I started high school. At that time it cost $1.25 a week to ride the bus, and I was getting $2, so to buy my clothes and food and stuff with. So one semester and I was broke, and that was the end of going to school.
Now you said you moved out and in with another family first when you were about 10. Did you see Grandpa and Grandma Rooney anytime during this time?
I'd see them.
Did they come to visit you?
No, but see them in town or something. So I was...
What was Grandpa Rooney doing at the time?
Well, when we...
Because we don't know anything about them.
He worked for farmers in the neighborhood for $1 a day. I can remember when I was living at home, when I might get up to $2 a day. I don't remember, but this was back in the Depression, and there was nobody, especially the farmers had no money. And there was a big drought in 36, and people cut down limbs off of trees to feed the cattle because there wasn't any grass. The crops didn't grow. It was really tough going. So I had, there was 6 in the family, 3 boys, 3 girls. I was the second from the youngest. The oldest were Francis and Catherine, who were twins. And then Marie and George and me and Teresa. I left that family when I was 16. I went to the wheat fields in Dakota. I worked with a custom combine outfit. I drove a self-propelled combine with a 16-foot platform, and I'd never even seen anything like that. We had 10 self-propelled combines and 12 trucks. I was the youngest. I was 16, and the oldest was 19. They were from all over the country. Very honest. I woke up in Williston, North Dakota on the 26th of August with 15 cents in my pocket and no breakfast. So I went to the employment office and asked if they had a job. They said they had 1 truck driving job. So while I was sitting there, 4 other guys older than me came in. When the man came in, he asked me if asked if I had a truck driver, and said I got 5 of them. And he looked around the room, and I don't know whether there's a hungry look in my eyes or what, but anyway, he came over and asked if I could drive truck, and I said yes. And he said, "You look kind of young," and I said, "I worked all my life." And he said, "I believe that." He said, $10 a day in your room and board. I could have kissed him. I had to get $5 to get some breakfast because I was hungry. I hadn't had any supper either. And we combined through a lot of Montana. And about the middle of September, went to Canada. And I had to have visa papers, and I was stopped many times by Mounties because several people went to Canada to escape the draft, and they couldn't believe I was 16 and I had to show them driver's license and everything else.
And this is the World War II wartime draft.
Right, this is 1944. So we finished up. It was the 26th of October, and it was cold. I was sleeping upstairs in the barn. It was warm. I had enough covers, but I had a coverall that was fairly greasy, and I went to put it on. It's so damn stiff I couldn't really get my feet into it. And 2 days later, we left there and came back to Williston. The man who owned the combines also had Dodge and Plymouth garage and had the Montana Dakota Distributing Company. And he distributed all the liquor and beer in northwestern North Dakota and northeastern Montana. So I hauled beer and liquor that winter out through Montana, drove semi, delivered bars, and came back in the spring and went to work for this man, and I was there 4.5 years. I went to Dakota after we got done filling silo in the fall. I'd go to Dakota for a month or so. Then I met your mother.
Wait, you spent 4 years in Dakota?
No, I spent 4 years with Tate Bakke, a farmer near here.
Oh, okay.
But a couple of years I'd go to Dakota when we get done filling silo until it was done harvesting in Dakota. Make a little extra money.
So you would go follow the wheat harvest every year?
Well, 3 years.
And then come back here?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what we call migratory farm workers now. I mean,
I guess so.
When the harvest was ready, you left your home and went out and picked crops.
And a couple falls, and I worked for a cement contractor in Waukon here. Push cement with a wheelbarrow.
And where were you living when you would come back here? Where did you live?
Well, I'd work for farmers in the wintertime, milking, cutting wood, and get my bed and my eats. And that was the way I lived, I guess.
So every fall after the harvest was done, you'd come back to town and just look around for somebody who would kind of hire you as a hired man. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah,
You'd stay with
yeah.
them and do chores and.
Cut wood and put up a setting of wood and split it.
And where were
And
all
go
the
to the-
where were all the other kids at this time? Where was George and where was Francis?
Well, George joined the Navy in 1940 before World War II, and he was at Pearl Harbor when that was bombed, or just outside the harbor when it was bombed. And there's 21 major battles in the South Pacific, and he was in 18 of them, so he saw a lot of action. Ship blowing out from under him.
A ship blown out from under him?
Well, yeah, they were torpedoed and the ship went down, and they had but when the Hornet went down, they had, I think, 600 and some men off the Hornet he was on the cruiser Portland, and they picked up many of the survivors from the Hornet. And Francis was drafted with the South Pacific, and he was at the bottom of the hill when they raised the flag. He was not at the top of the hill, but he was on Iwo Jima. Catherine, my older sister.
Do you know where else Francis might have been? I mean, how long he was in the service and where else he might have gone?
Well, he went basic training and was shipped out almost immediately because they were so short on men. And he was gone, I think, 28 months in the service. I think he got out in 46, went farming, raised a family of 6 children. His twin sister married Cyril Grady. He was drafted, and he was in Africa, Sicily, Italy, up into Europe. They raised 6 children. Marie had married Herb Bruns and had 5 children. The youngest one, 4 months to 10 years. And the night we were supposed to have our wedding dance, she shot herself. Left 5 little children. And I stayed with her many nights. She was kind of my second mother, her mother, whatever. And I was next, and Teresa. So I met your mother.
Well, now, we don't know much about Teresa either.
Well, Teresa never married. 1990, she ran restaurants in Waukon, Newhall, Keystone, Cedar Rapids, Ladora, and was back in Waukon and got an infection that they didn't know how to stop. And 6 days later, she died in intensive care in hospital La Crosse.
And she had Perry, who died young.
Died 20 years old. Was never married.
Do we know who Perry's father is?
Paris Wallace. He's from Detroit anyway. They were living in Detroit at the time. Mother and Dad and Teresa.
And how old was Teresa when Perry was born?
Well, let's see. She was born in 33, and Perry was born in 54.
21. Okay. And I remember Francis being on the farm over in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
What, was he always in that place?
No, he, like most farmers, started out on a half with Paul Huntsmeyer for 2 or 3 years, then went to Ray Brestman's in Hanover. Was there for 4 years, and then bought his father-in-law's farm in Volney. Was there for 10, 11 years. Then bought a farm in Wisconsin and farmed there until he died.
Did the rest of the kids leave home when they were young, the
Oh,
way
yeah.
you did?
Yeah. Well, everybody did, except Teresa.
Because they wanted to, or because they had to, or because of economic circumstances?
Economic circumstances. There just was no money, no food. No.
And
So-
in those days, it wasn't uncommon for kids to go live with other families, right?
Not well. Somebody needed help, and you get your room and board and a few bucks a month. So, I grew up young. Didn't go to high school, but I got a lot of education. And I guess I kind of made myself a promise that if our kids wanted an education, I'd see that they'd get it, because I thought education was important. I dreamed about being a veterinary, which never happened. So then I met your mother. She liked to dance, and I liked to dance. We got along great. 2.5 years later, we were married. St. Mary's, Lycurgus.
Do you remember how you actually met? And no comments from over here.
Well, she was taking her brother to the Prairie du Chien to get on the Zephyr to go to Chicago, and she had a bad battery in her car, and she's afraid it'd stop. And her brother said, "There's a big, strong young fellow there that if we need a push, I think he could do it." So they picked me up, and I went to Prairie du Chien. But the car kept running, and my motor kicked in when I saw her. So well, that was the start of it, I guess.
And that was Nobby, right?
Well, Nobby was the one that said stop. She didn't take
Right.
Norbert back to Chicago.
And to this day, Nobby takes credit for putting you two together.
Oh, yes.
You know.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, he was the best man at our wedding. And he lets me know he was the best man at our wedding.
Now, what did you do when you were dating? Because there wasn't any money, right? You both lived on farms.
Yeah.
It sounds like she had a car. Did you have a car?
No.
So what did you do? What was a typical date? I mean, you couldn't even call each other on the telephone, right?
No, they didn't have a telephone.
So tell me how you carry on a courtship with no car and no telephone and no money. I'm sure a lot of people would like to know that.
I guess anything works if you try hard enough and want it bad enough. But we'd meet in town and go to dances. And sometimes she'd come pick me up. And it was great. We got married the 15th of January. And the priest said he was going to start Mass at 8 o'clock, whether we were there or not. He could take flowers into the entry, but not in the church. So I'm not really sure we're married, because I ain't too sure that fellow was a priest. But anyway, we've been living together for 51 years. So then the day we got married, it was raining. And then it turned to, got cold, went to Rochester for a short honeymoon. Next morning, we were going to get up and go to Mass, and couldn't get in the car, and had a half-inch ice on it. So we walked 2-3 blocks in the ice to Mass, I guess. Then we came back and went farming with her dad on the 3rd. And
What's a third?
a third of the net profit. First year, our wages were $800 some, I think. And if we milked 8 or 9 beef cows that didn't give much milk, I know there was once our share of the check was $2, $3. And I had lived with electricity ever since I was 10 years old, because these people I'd lived with had electricity. And we got married, there was no electricity, no phone, which is a big change. I have to carry a lantern and read by a lamp. And so I was not very happy, and I started drinking more than I should. And after 6 years and 3 small children, she said she's going to leave me, and I asked her where she'd find another fellow like me, and she said she didn't want another fellow like me. So I kind of got my life turned around with the help of a lot of good people. And in 1958, her dad died. Her older brother was the executor. And when Pete was there, her brothers and sisters had come from the city and expected her to cook the meals and take care of the kids because we're on vacation. Thought that would continue. We would buy the farm and they'd always have a place to come. And I kind of straightened that out. And her dad told her brother not to sell the farm to us, because I would lose it. But we bought the farm. We're the first ones, there was a big write-up in the paper, we're the first ones that bought a farm through the FHA. Without FHA money, we had to find the money, and they'd guarantee the loan. So we bought a rundown farm with no fences, no running water, no furnace, a lot of ditches. But with Gene's help and kids' help, we made a 1964, we're both outstanding young farmers in Elmkey County. And a lot of hard work and a lot of management. We made a success of it. Yeah.
Let's go back just a little bit. Now, it can't have been easy working with Pete.
No, it was very hard. I had a lot of farming ideas of my own, and he would not go along with them. I wanted a contour strip, I wanted to farm with a tractor, and he wanted to farm with horses. And there was a lot of frustrating days.
So how much time was it between the time you got married and moved on to the farm and the time Pete died and you bought the farm?
Well, we're married 15th of January, 49. He died the 20th of September of 58.
So that was a long time you worked together.
No, we didn't work together. I bought a milking machine, and the guy come to put it in, and he told the guy, I'm not going to pay for that. And the guy said, it's already paid for. And he never did figure that one out, but he was playing cards about 2 weeks later in town, and somebody said something about his chore time, and he said, hey, Rooney put in a milk machine. I don't have to go home for chores anymore. So that was... And
You mean a milking machine to milk the cows automatically?
Well, not automatically, but at least I could do in 25 minutes what it took an hour.
But I remember as a kid, sometimes you milking cows by hand. When would you milk a cow by hand?
Well, before we got the milk machine, which was We got the milk machine about 56, I guess, so you'd have been 5 years old.
Were there times when you milked cows by hand after that for any reason?
Well, just the first couple milkings when the milk was thick.
Okay,
And,
maybe that was it.
yeah.
Because I remember spraying milk over to the cats.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember trying to milk a cow on my own for the first time. So what was your days like on the farm?
Well, you get up 6 o'clock and get the cows and milk them. I was fortunate enough, about the second year we were married, I bought a border collie dog who, after the first 6 months, I never had to leave the barnyard to get the cows and send Queen after the cows. And she would put them in the barn, and if she left one, she'd go back and get it. She was the closest thing to a human being I know of in an animal. We sold, 78 pups out of her and guaranteed them to heal. And 2 of them came back. No, it didn't come back. They said they didn't heal, so sold them for $5, and I give the guys their $5 back. And I found out afterwards they got the cows by themselves and healed. They needed the $5 worse than I did. Fine.
And what does healing mean?
Well, it means nipping them on the heels and staying behind them. And she had herd sheep, pigs. If I was hauling her and had the gate open, she'd lay in the gate all day with sheep and pigs and cattle there, and never open or shut a gate. She'd just lay there all day and lie shut the gate. It was great.
So healing is kind of to be a
Herd the cattle from the behind and not run them to. If you've ever seen, mostly it's sheep, you've seen that those are border collies and the way they work is the way she worked. Great. Till she got blind and couldn't walk, and I was gone town one day and I had a young fella helping me. And when I came home, she didn't meet me at the gate, and I never asked a question. I didn't want to know. So then we bought the farm in '58 and improved it. And it was good to us, great place to raise 6 kids.
What kind of improvements did you make on the farm?
Oh, we tore out all the fences and contoured, stripped it. It was a 280-acre farm. There was 160 acres of work land, and then the buildings, and 120 acres of rough land with water in it. We went from milking shorthorn cows to a beef herd of 65 to 70 cows and raised the calves to 500-600 pounds, and then sold them as feeders to guys who fed them out. We sold a lot of hogs. We sold hogs at least 11 months of the year. Not a lot every month, but that was our constant income. And improved the machinery. First thing we did was put in a heating system and a water and sewer system. Did it ourselves. Bought a heating system and a water system from a guy who didn't have it in the house very long, and then put up another house, or moved to another house, and we took everything out of that and put it in our house. Never had an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter on the place. Put in some long hours. And I remember I got up one morning and Mother had the scale sitting by the bed and said, "You get on that." So I got on, and I'd lost 26 pounds in about 5 weeks. So she made an appointment with the doctor, and I went to the doctor, and he took some tests, couldn't find anything. took some more tests in Iowa City, and then he called me and he said, I can't find nothing wrong. I said, just what the hell are you doing? And I said, well, I was picking core in the daytime and I was putting in a furnace and water system at night. And he said, when do you sleep? And I said, when I get this done. And he said, no, you will sleep a minimum of 7 hours a night. So I did that, and I put on 20 pounds in a month. And I said, I've been doing this all year, because I was going to pay for the farm the first year. But I said, I've been doing this all year. And he said, yeah, you run on reserve. He said, you don't have any reserve. He said, you're pooped. So, but then in 1963, I was asked if I would work part-time in a state liquor store. First day I worked was the day John Kennedy was shot. So I remember the first day I worked in the liquor store, November 1963. And I went from part-time clerk to a full-time clerk, and in 1972 was appointed manager until 1987 when Iowa went out of the liquor business. And I went to work for a couple of young fellows that took it over to private, and they put in movies and beer and that loading kegs, 16-gallon kegs in the back seat of a two-door car on a Friday night wasn't my idea of making a living. So I told them in November I was going to quit the 1st of May when I was 62, and they said, well, you work part-time, and I said, no. I said, well, you just can't do nothing. I said, bullshit, I can give lessons on doing nothing. And I can't. But I've been retired for 10 years, and I love every minute of it. We sold, we had a farm sale the 9th of October, 1978. We moved to town the 15th of October, and we lost Mary Lynn the 19th of October, so it was a long 2 weeks. But things worked out.
Would you talk about Mary Lynn?
Yeah. Well, when Mary was 2 years old, she was a chubby little gal going around the house with singing, humming. When she was 4 years old, she was skin and bone. She had asthma real bad. We used to sit and hold her till it seemed like the air cleared up, maybe 5 or so in the morning. She'd sleep till 9, 10. And she was on liquid codeine and some kind of shots. And the doctor said we'd have to take her to Arizona, and I said we couldn't afford to. And he said, you can't afford not to. So I was going to a lady chiropractor at the time. I have 2 crushed vertebrae in my spine. And Mother had taken Mary Lynn to the doctor the day before, and she had passed out, and they couldn't bring her to for about 45 minutes. She was so loaded with medicine. So the doctor said, take her home. She'd be better off at home than she would be in the hospital. And he called 3 times that night to see how she was. But this lady chiropractor said she'd had a lot of success with asthmatics. She'd like to see her, so I took her in that afternoon, and she's going up her spine. She found a spot about as big as my little finger. She said, there's your problem, and she pushed that in. And I knew she was going to die that night. She seemed like she'd go a minute or more without breathing. The next day it was a little better. I held her all night that night, I think. And the next night she was better, and the next day I took her back, and she gave her one more treatment, and that was the end of the asthma. She played first string softball, first string basketball, had the school record for the mile run. So it She was a good student, had a beautiful voice, sang at weddings, and was president of student council, president of senior class, and she went to UNI and was on the dean's list. But when she came home from UNI, it was something wasn't right. I never accused her, but I felt she was probably on drugs. She quit UNI after the first year and went to a school in Minneapolis, became a travel agent. But things weren't right. And she was a travel agent in Des Moines. She came home. She was working at Heimer's in the daytime and attending bar at Clancy's at night, and we got a call from Lansing that something was very wrong, so we went down and picked her up. Took her to Des McIver, who was head of the mental health in Decorah. He talked to her about 5 minutes, and he said, "Rylan's a manic depressive. How do you feel about that?" And I said, "It scares hell out of me because I never heard the word before." So he sent us to La Crosse to a psychiatrist, same diagnosis. But he said if he had a mental disease, and manic depression is what he'd have, because there's a medicine called lithium which controls it, much like insulin controls diabetes. He said there was nothing she did could have caused it. There's nothing she could have done to prevent it, but that lithium controlled it for 80% of the people. So she went on lithium and things were good for a while. She'd get her blood tested every month. In the 9th month, she got her blood tested, and they said if she stayed on that, her heart would explode, her body would quit absorbing it, and it was in her bloodstream. So, and the highs got very high, and the lows very low. And she did everything she could, and we did everything we could, but she'd look in the mirror, and this is what I was 2 years ago, and this is what I am today. So she took her life the 19th of October.
So there's nothing anyone could have done to have changed anything?
Nothing. The doctor said there was a chemical deficiency in her body that God just didn't put there. So it left a big hole. The other 5 have pretty well filled it in, so for that I'm grateful.
You want to take a break?
No, I'm all right.
We also don't know anything about the days when you were drinking. Mother won't tell anybody anything, and you've never told anybody anything. So, do you want anyone to know? You want us to know? Because I've been curious.
I would go to town maybe at 10 o'clock in the morning and figure on being home for noon, and I'd get home midnight. Mother'd ask me why, and I'd say I must be an alcoholic, and she'd say, "Oh, no, you're not," because an alcoholic was somebody that down Skid Row had nothing. And I hadn't lost the respect of the public so much, but I lost the greatest possession anybody has. I lost my self-respect. So after 2-3 years, it just progressively got worse. I tried to stop, and I couldn't. So when she said she's going to leave me, I came home from town after being in town all day, and so that night I knew some guys were in AA, so Hell, she was a great lady. I'd go to the field at 5 o'clock in the morning and stay there till midnight. She'd do the chores, but if I was in town drinking, she didn't do any chores. So, which is great. So after I got the cows milked, I went back town, and a couple of fellas I knew, I contacted them, and on a Monday night, I went to a meeting on Wednesday night. She went with me. And there was a guy there that was sober 10 years. And I remember going home. She said, "Wouldn't it be great if you could stay sober 10 years?" And I said, "Wouldn't it be great if I could stay sober a year?" But that man said something that, he said, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, if your drinking's ever caused tears, you have a problem. So I'd caused a lot of tears, so I had a problem. I didn't want to admit I was an alcoholic. I didn't want to admit that something that brown liquid in the bottle was bigger than I was, 'cause I figured I'd licked everything all my life. But it was very hard for me to ask for help, because I never asked for help before. And he said, and I saw a sign on the wall. It said, "You're not alone anymore." And though I was married to a great lady and had 3 beautiful kids, my own little crappy world, I was alone. But it was the best thing I ever did. Life has been so damn good to me. It taught me how to live, how to accept myself and other people, and take the bad with the good. And I've had a lot of good. Blessed. So I live every day as if my last could be. I got no guarantees I'll see the sun come up tomorrow, but every day is thank you. I'll take a little break for a while.
So we don't really know anything about your father, because all I remember about Grandpa Rooney was having seen him at the county home. I think more than once, but I must have been pretty young. So that's really all I know about him.
Well, he was deaf from the time I knew him. Very deaf. Worked for farmers in the neighborhood for several years. Then he went to Detroit and got a job as a custodian, I guess you'd call it, in a factory up there. Until, well, after Marie died, Mother came back from Detroit and took care of 5 Bruins kids. And 2 or 3 years later, then he quit or retired or something. He got a little pension, I remember. Came back, and in the later years, they call it Alzheimer's now. They called it hardened arteries then. He spent time in the mental health institute, and different county care facilities till he died.
And what kind of a man was he?
Quiet, gentle man, small man. Very dominated by my mother, who was a very strong, dominating woman. Never saw him mad. didn't dare, I guess. But just never had anything in his life.
And did he drink?
No.
He didn't?
Oh, he might have a glass of beer with somebody, but mother did a lot. That was why there was nothing at home most of the time.
Well, tell me about Grandma then. You said Grandma was taking care of 5 Bruins kids. That's because Marie was dead, right?
Right.
The Bruins kids were Marie's kids.
From 4 months to 10 years.
So tell me everything you know about her.
Well, she many times had embarrassed me because she'd come stumbling out of the bar and I was coming down the street with maybe a nice girl, my son. But she had a drinking problem and couldn't do anything about it, really. But she and Teresa took care of her until, well, for a lot of years, and then we kind of decided Teresa had done it long enough, so she's going to live with us a month, and with Catherine a month, and with Francis a month. So she was here a month, and then went to Catherine's for a month, and then went over to Francis, and about 10 days she called, and, can you come over? I want to talk to you. So I went over, and let's go in the other room. Said, I want to go to the nursing home. Can I? And I said, if that's what you want. Well, the deal was when she lived with us and lived with Catherine, she'd call her friends on the phone and talk. Over there, she couldn't. So I said, well, do you want to go home with us tonight? Yes. I said, I'll help you get your clothes together. They're already packed. She came home with us and stayed with us for another 5-6 weeks. There was an opening in the nursing home. So she went there and was very contented there. She had a tumor in her head which would break now and then. She'd bleed out of the ears. And Dr. Wiley asked me what I thought about that, and I said, at her age, I hadn't seen put her through any surgery, and he said, well, she's a chronic diabetic with a bad heart, let's just hope goes in. So she ate supper one night, back to her room, and 20 minutes later they checked on her and she was dead. She's from a large family of egotistical alcoholics, most of them, some good ones too. We're all gone now.
And did you know her family?
Yeah, she had John and Vince and Frank and Leo and Bernard and Claire and Mamie and her and Martina, who died. Oh, and Clem was killed in World War I. So it must have been 8 boys and 3 girls.
And where did they live?
In the Cherry Mound area down near Waterville. And Irvin. Yeah, there was a lot of them. Johnny and Vince and Claire and Bernard and Irvin and Frank and Clem. And some were good fellas. Some of them weren't.
Would I have ever met them? Any of them?
No. Because I remember one time, Leo, who was probably 5'6" or 7" and 130 pounds and got a pint in him. He was 6'4" and 300 pounds. And he was out the house one time and I said something to him and he was going to kick my butt. And I took off running, and of course he couldn't catch me. And I turned around and said, someday I'm going to be big enough you can't do that. And about 10 years later, I was down in Rossville, and he was down there, and he was sitting in the booth, and I went over, and I said, I think I'm big enough. He said, what do you mean? I said, remember when you were going to kick my butt? And I told you, someday I was going to be big enough. He couldn't. I said, let's go outside. And he wouldn't get up, so I slapped him, open hand. He wouldn't get up. So I got him by the front of the shirt, and I couldn't even pull him up. And I waited 10 years to kick the shit out of him. I never got the job done. So be careful what you wish for. You might not get it.
Well, I remember Grandma babysitting us. Were you ever worried about leaving us with Grandma?
No, not really. She was responsible. I mean, God, she raised them Bruins kids for several years. So no, I really wasn't.
So she took care of the kids that were in her charge.
Yeah. And, but you were wondering about your birth and the rest of them. Mother, when she was pregnant with Cheryl, her first child, got kidney poisoning and puffed up terribly. And on Christmas Eve, we came into the doctor, and the hospital then was a house over in East Main Street. And called a doctor, and he came about 9 o'clock. We come in about 8:30. And he stayed all Christmas Eve. His family, daughter and son were home for Christmas, and he never left the hospital because he didn't think Cheryl would live. He had a lady there to baptize her when she's born. And she was born 8:15 on Christmas night, and a healthy baby. A lot of forceps and cutting, but she was. About 2 days later, I'm visiting your mother, and he come in carrying her, and laid her on the pillow beside her. He said she was crying out in the other room. He can't let her cry. She ain't supposed to be alive. But she grew up, and then you were born the 10th of October, the first baby born in the new hospital, and one of the rules were in the new hospital, the dads did not go into the delivery room. And I said, well, I'm going in. And CW said, well, with the other one, he's out there for 24 hours in the delivery room. I think we'll let him in here too. So the first time I come to visit you, Jean's brother Don was in Korea and in Japan. He bought a white silk tie with a big red rose on it. And I said if I had a boy, I was going to wear that. So the first time I come to visit your mother, I had that on, and I haven't seen it since. She hated it. I think it went in the garbage when she got home. And then Tom was a fast delivery. We got to the hospital, and the nurse started towards the elevator, and she said, I ain't got time to that thing, so she went up 2 flights of stairs. There was 3 women in the labor room, and she passed all 3 of them, went in and delivered him in about 10 minutes.
In and out.
So then Mary Lynn, she was a normal birth. Well, then Diane, we came in 10, 11 o'clock, and a good friend of ours is a nurse. She's going off duty at 7. And Diane wasn't born yet, so Mother said, I'd like where she was born before you'd leave. So she gave her half a shot, and right now. But when it was a good thing it was, because when she was born, it was just the nurse and I. And cord is wrapped around her neck, and she was black, and she wasn't breathing. And she put that machine on her, and that didn't do anything. So she gave her mouth to mouth and got her breathing. And the only other person, though, was a nurse. And she come and got her and took her to the nursery and cleaned her up. Ruth, who was John Baxter's sister, who I'd gone with for 6, 8 months before I met your mother, she went out in the hall and she started to shake, and she said, it's bad enough when it's somebody you don't know, but when it's somebody you know, that's. So then when Casey was born, I started in the delivery room, and Dr. Bray said, you can't come in here. We got enough to do without taking care of a fainting father. And Clark said, hell, he delivered the last one. I think he can come in. So, well, put on some booties and a gown anyway. So that's kind of the story of that, I guess.
And so what was it like working on the farm? I mean, Mother worked on the farm too.
Very hard.
Right? And all of us kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard work, it was long hours, but I don't regret one day we were there. I don't regret one day leaving it. I know when we put in the furnace, the chimney was no good. They wanted $100 to lay up the chimney. So I said, I think we can do that. So Mother mixed the cement, and I carried the blocks, and we built a chimney. Come on, Jeannie, baby, we're going to build a chimney. We put in the waterworks and the sewer works and everything ourselves.
And how did you figure out how to do all that stuff?
Well, after we got the house remodeled, we changed room, put the kitchen where the living room was, and put a bedroom where the kitchen was, and put in the bathroom. And one of my so-called friends asked me, or said, I didn't know you were a carpenter, and I said, I'm a damn good carpenter. He said, you're conceited ass too. And I said, well, I was told a good carpenter cover up his mistakes, and I covered up a lot of them. So then we decided to quit firemen, because none of the kids wanted to farm, which then I didn't encourage it. Mother thought she wanted to live in the country, because she didn't want close neighbors. Our closest neighbor was half a mile. So I said, well, if we're going to live in the country, we're going to live here, because I had put in everything myself, knew how to repair it and replace it. So we looked some different places, and I come home from work one night in the store, and she said, I found the house I want. I said, okay. Because I told her either find the house she wanted or find a lot and build what she wanted, and I wasn't going to live in the country. So the next morning I was standing on the step out here, and this 80-year-old lady come to the door, and she had never seen me, and I never saw her. And, well, Mrs. Fitzgerald down here said that there was a house for sale. She met her at a sale or something, got talking. So I said, I understand you might sell your house. And she said, I've been thinking about it. I said, I'd like a chance. So 3 days later, she called and asked me if I was serious, and I said, yes. I said, I'd like to talk to you. And I found out, and I got up here the next time, that Elmer Fote, who was president of the bank, was her brother-in-law, and she knew more about me than I knew about me. So we went through the house, and she wanted to. I liked what I saw. It was a very well-built house, and Mother liked it, so. We sat down, she said, what did you give me? And I said, well, I hate to put a price on somebody else's property, and make me an offer. So we made her an offer, and she said, well, we were thinking of $2,000 more. And I said, we're not going to quibble for $2,000. So that was in September. There wasn't a dollar exchanged hands or a piece of paper signed. She didn't want anybody to know it, because she had some nieces and nephews that wanted it, but she wanted to live here for another year, and I said, that's fine, because I'm going to farm another year. She called about in March, and she said, are you still figuring on buying my house? And I said, well, I thought we had an agreement. And she said, and I said, you didn't want anybody else to know it. And she said, well, I didn't think anybody could keep a secret like that. So the 1st of July, she called, and the 2nd of July, and said she'd bought another house closer downtown, across the street from the church. She wanted her money. And I had told the banker what I was going to do. We hadn't had a sale. We hadn't had sold the farm or nothing. But the banker said to write a check and come down and make out the papers. So. But he told one of the guys in the bank, but he didn't tell anybody else, and he was on vacation. So she called the 2nd of July, and wanted her money so she could pay for this other house. So I wrote a check 2nd July, figured on going down the 3rd, and Mary Lynn got a real bad spell and had to take her to the hospital. And then they were closed the 4th, and I walked in the 5th, and this guy that I didn't get along with in the bank was over about 15 feet in the office, the door of his office. There was probably 7, 8 customers in there and all the help, and he said, "Do you know you're over $40,000 overdrawn?" I said, "Oh yeah, I do that all the time." And he said it loud enough that the guy that didn't know was 4 doors up in another office, and he heard it. So he came out and told me to come up there, and Betty Faring, who had worked there for years, brought my file in, and she said, "You did business here a lot of years, a lot of good business. Never had a bad check," but she said, "When you write a bad one, it's a good one." So we bought it then and moved a little, and Casey had a bad accident and demolished the car, so we bought a van. Mother loaded up in the daytime. We'd come in at night and unload it because we could put it in the rooms we wanted to because the house was empty. Put a new roof on, new windows. Fixed up the basement. Waited 2 years to fix up the basement. No water problems or nothing. So insulated it, paneled it, put in the ceiling, put in the carpet, and the sewage started coming in. We had sewage on the floor 8 times in 6 years. Put ball cocks in the drains, but we also had a stool in the basement, so it didn't force up the stool to come in. So finally went to city council, and the guy said he knew what the problem was and could fix it in a week. City attorney said, "You better fix it because you're open to a lawsuit." A couple of days after, the city attorney said, "Well, you got a pretty ruddy complexion." He said, "You were pretty red when you left that council meeting." And I said, "I had to leave, or I'd hit that fellow." He said, "I'd have defended you, and there isn't a jury in Northeast Iowa that would have convicted you." But anyway, we've got that problem solved now, so we're enjoying it.
Well, how did you feel about leaving the farm after so many years?
No regrets. Like I say, it was a good place for 30 years, good place to raise the kids. The arthritis was moving in pretty bad. I couldn't do 2 jobs anymore. I just accepted the fact that I couldn't farm. And the day we moved, we stopped at the mailbox. Mother took a picture of the buildings and the driveway, and that was the last one to see of it. Sold it to good people. The payment was there a day or 2 before it was due. No problems. That was another stage in life. You move on.
But the farm was a good place to raise kids, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was good to us. We sold hogs from $10 a hundred to $61 a hundred. And they say, thanks to her, we're voted outstanding young farmers in Albuquerque County. And that covers quite a territory, a little pride in that. Because I guess that was 1964 and 1954, and I probably could have been voted the outstanding young drunk in Albuquerque County, so things do change. But,
How did you like the farm? How did you like the farm?
I'll tell you later. Now, I remember you were the only Irish, Catholic, young, progressive farmer in kind of a whole sea of old German,
Norwegian,
old-fashioned,
Swede.
right. So what was it like trying to implement new things with all those guys looking over the fence?
Oh, we were criticized and laughed at. We were the first people in their area that had a wheel rake for raking hay, which everybody uses today, but then that was unheard of. We're the first one that had a hay vine. They cut a 9-foot swath and put it in the windrow. because they used mowers and raked it. We were laughed at for that, and then next year everybody wanted to borrow it. We're the third one in the county that had a round baler. First one in that area. They really thought it was crazy. Now everybody has round bales. We did wheel track planting, which was unheard of. You plowed the ground and just planted the corn in the tracks, so the tractor moved the wheels in. It was called minimum tillage then, and they all do it now, but we bought a rotavator and used it instead of a plow and a disc and a drag, and that was stupid. I always figured it's stupid to plow up the ground, then drive over it and drag it, then drive over it twice and disc it, and then drive over it and drag it again, and then drive over it with the planter, the drills, with the rotavator. I hooked the drill behind the rotavator, and one pass I had those seated. And then the corn land, I'd go over it once and loosen it up, and then hooked the corn planter behind the rotavator. And so I had 2 trips across the land. I had the corn planted, and that was unheard of and stupid. They all want to do it now, so we were just ahead of our time.
Well, it sounds like it took a lot less time to do all those things.
Oh, a lot less time, fuel, soil compaction. But we just were odd.
And do you miss the farm at all?
No. No. Mhm. I've learned to, thanks, I guess, to AA, to accept life as it is. Go on. An old gentleman told me a lot of years ago, be careful what you pray for, you might get it. So I am very careful what I pray for. I've gotten so many things I didn't pray for. I hear people say that I just don't get what I deserve. I hope to Christ I never get what I deserve.
Well, one looking at the progression of the kids here can't help but notice that it's kind of 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, and then there's a great big gap before Casey came along.
Well, not really.
Isn't there?
Diane was born in 58 and he was born in 61. 2 years, 2 years,
I thought
3
there was
years.
I thought there was a lot bigger space between Diane and Casey.
No, 58 to 61.
Oh, okay.
And when he was about 4 years old, I told your mother I thought he ought to have somebody to play with. She said, fine, play with him.
What did you say?
I said, I thought Casey ought to have somebody to play with. You said, fine, play with him.
So you've had a lot of successes, actually.
And some failures, but you learn by them.
Mm-hmm. When you look back on your life, what do you think the most important part is?
Your mother.
The most fun?
Most important part.
Yeah. Because when I was going to marry her, Tade Bach, he said, a woman can make you or break you, and that one's going to make you. And he's right. I didn't appreciate her at times, but every year I appreciate her more. People ask me how I am, and I say, great, no complaints. What do you mean, no complaints? I said, I got a beautiful lady that lived with me 51 years and tells me she loves me, and my kids call me Dad. What the hell more can you want? And that's about it. A lot of times when I talk, I say, my kids call me, and when we talk on the phone, before they hang up, they say, I love you, and I say, I love them. And I said, a guy in his 70s telling guys in their 40s and he loves them is crazy. You know, it's easy to tell a woman you love them, but very often a man tells another one that he loves them. And I mean it. So it's been great. A few things I regret, but few things I feel good about, too.
You want to tell us about them?
Oh, my drinking, mostly. I mean, I caused some tears that I shouldn't have. But since then, I met some of the greatest people in the world.
And of course, I always tell people we have the kids in this family have all the benefit of being around AA without any of the drawback of growing up with someone who was alcoholic, because we never saw any of that. And it only takes one person to break the chain. And you broke the chain.
I guess so. Yeah, it was great. Because it not only, to me, AA is not, and I know it's the most important thing, sobriety, but it taught me how to live. Taught me to appreciate things. Because I've seen both sides of life. Most people don't. And I got so much to be grateful for that most people don't even know about. Never went through that.
But you gave a lot back, too, because I remember growing up, there'd be a phone call late at night, and you'd go out and look for somebody's husband who'd been gone for 3 days. So you gave back, too.
Oh, yeah. We covered a lot of miles. Last night, there was that fellow was sitting at that table. And he walked in and he told me his name. And Mother come out the field one night about 8 o'clock. Said, Kurt Iverson wanted to talk to me. So I called him. He said he wanted to take this guy to Pioneer House in Minneapolis. So I took a shower, cleaned up, put on some different clothes, went to Decorah, picked up Kurt, went to Cresco and picked this guy up. We got him admitted about 1 o'clock or 1:30. Probably 1:30. And then we ate someplace the way home, and I came home and took off my good clothes, put on my work clothes, and went back to the field. 2 days later, Kurt told me this fellow was in Decorah on the 11 o'clock bus the next day. Now, I could have killed him, and that was the guy that was sitting at the table last night with the green shirt on. I haven't seen him since. That's a lot of years ago. Back in the 60s. Haven't seen him since. He's been sober a year now.
Well, tell me, were we kids ever any help on the farm?
Oh, Jesus Christ, couldn't have done it without you.
Because I remember you telling somebody once, if you've got one son helping you, you've got a son. If you've got 2 sons helping you, you only have half a son. And if you've got 3 sons helping you, you only have a third of a son.
Yeah, but none of the 3, you and Tom were about the same, but Casey was quite a bit younger, so things were a little easier for him. And he didn't have to go through what you went through, and Tom probably, because people say they taught their kids things. Shit, you kids taught me more than I ever taught you. Because you're all different. And Casey had a little easier than I. Knew enough to back off a little bit. Knew enough I couldn't live your life for you. I didn't know that. There's no book comes how to raise kids, or not when they're all different. So, hell, you guys taught me more than I ever taught you.
So who was the toughest one of us to raise?
Well, Mother raised you all, and me too.
That was a nice way out of that question.
No, they're all different. I wouldn't pick, because each one had their own problems, and I didn't have the answers for a lot of them. No, I wouldn't pick one over the other. I thank God for each one of you, but I wouldn't pick one over the other. That's about as plain as I can put it.
Didn't help or didn't know.
What?
What we didn't know what was going on. That was a good thing too.
Well, when Cheryl had you guys write down some stuff, and Tom had in his, did anybody know that brown Ford would do 60 before he got to the driveway going in the field? You said, hell, we all knew that except Dad. And I think that was probably the truth.
But growing up here, you also knew all the things we did as soon as they were done. I mean, I remember one afternoon you saying, Well, so and so pulled you out of the ditch in the brown Ford last night. Bunch of kids around, nobody hurt.
Well, I always tried to tell you, if you got into any kind of trouble, to let me know. Maybe I could help you. And as far as hiding it, I was going to find out anyway.
And you always did.
Well, most of it. Most of it.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a family farm kind of lifestyle that's disappeared from
Oh,
Iowa in a
terrible.
big way. You want to talk about that? About how you feel about that?
Well, I'm very frustrated. People blame the government, blame agri, co-ops, this kind of thing. I blame the farmer. I worked very hard back in the 50s and 60s to get NFO going, which is a National Farmers Organization. It was set up for the farmer to produce and sell at a reasonable profit. But these farmers were too damn independent. We had a price set for hogs, for cattle, but their independence is killing them today because the big hog producer, like I hear in the news now, the packer bids on cattle on Thursday and Friday, but he don't have to the other 5 days because he has them contracted in a feed lot where he could fill in, keep the going. Now the farmer could have done that himself. You want 10,000 pigs today? We'll put these together and you'll have 10,000 pigs. You need so much milk. It was set up, I felt it was, that you sell so many pounds of pork for this price, $22.75 is the price. You might only take 12 cents for some of it because you produce too much. But at the time, we were selling pigs for $10.55, $10.50, $10.55, and it made sense to me. Everybody prices that product as soon as it goes out the farm gate. The man who has the money invested in it, who produces it, who grows it, doesn't put a price on it. But as soon as it goes on that truck, whether it's milk, cows, pigs, somebody prices it. Why not the producer price it? I mean, it just makes sense. If I went into Platt's down here, buy a car, and he said, how much should you give me? I'd laugh at him. But the farmer does it every day. Just because well, I don't say they're stupid, they're too independent, don't want, well, for many years, a lot of them depended on the government. Even at that time, they were probably 20% of the population. Today, the American farmer is 2% of the population. The politician is going to please the 98% that elect him, not the 2% that produce the food. So he's not going to do anything for the farmer, but you can't tell some of these farmers that. But, I just get frustrated. But I also accept the things I cannot change, and I realize I can't change them. I tried. But, and maybe we had too many radicals and get into it. But it made sense to me, and I spent a lot of hours, a lot of miles. And I don't regret it. I tried. I don't think failure means anything if you tried the best you could. You learn.
Okay, well, this is the hardest question of all. And you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But how old are you now? 72? So you've been on the planet for 72 years, and you've had a lot of successes and a lot of failures, and you married a good woman, and you've been through a lot of different phases in your life, and you raised the 6 of us. What do you know for certain? If you stripped away all of the bull, what do you know in your heart of hearts is true?
Oh, I think I'm probably the most fortunate man in the Middle West. Like I say, I've got a beautiful wife, got 5 beautiful living children. I have a very working good relationship with God. I have deep faith in Him. I've met some of the greatest people in the world. I went from plowing ground with a team of horses and the 6-inch walking plow to watch a man drive around on the moon. I went from no telephone, no radio to you people who put a piece of paper in a machine and 30 seconds later it's overseas. It befuddles me. I'm happy I lived in the time I did. I think God has been so good to me, and people have. I think, well, over the years I got my own self-respect back, and I got the respect of people in the community. And I truly believe that the greatest teacher in the world is the example. I hope that at times I've set an example that somebody else would like to follow. And I'm happy. I love life. That's it.